Tonight's program is Ballroom Has Something to Say, featuring Twiggy Poochie Garçon. This event has arisen as an educational counterpart to the Rainbow Center's annual drag show. The event serves to help bridge the historical context of ballroom with modern ballroom and drag cultures. The Rainbow Center's drag show will be on April 2nd at 7 p.m. in the Student Union Theater. Tickets will be available on the SUBOG website starting on March 11th. If you missed any of that, the information is written in your programs for the evening, and so it's right in front of you. For now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Twiggy. As an activist, advocate, and healer, Twiggy has collaborated with artists, filmmakers, and academics and policymakers to increase the visibility of both creative and socio-political agendas. Twiggy served at Faces New York, Inc. as a recruitment specialist, senior community health specialist, and more recently as a program development specialist and community organizer. With over 9 years of experience in the field of general and specialized health education and direct services, she has extensive knowledge of the needs of the LGBTQ youth population and how to foster relationships with organizations that offer effective quality services. In their current role as a program director at the True Colors Fund, Twiggy leads their youth collaboration programs aimed at not only elevating youth voices, but also creating space for partnerships with young adults to lead the movement to end youth homelessness. In addition to her activism and advocacy work, Twiggy has worked as a model and runway trainer, performance artist, and special events and talent management coordinator. She and her work have been featured in major media publications and media outlets such as Out Magazine, Paper Magazine, New York Mag, The Huffington Post, The Metro Weekly, and The Advocate, among others. Twiggy was also featured in a Timothy Greenfield Sanders and HBO documentary featured film The Outlist, and is the co-writer of and one of 7 subjects in the Sundance selected award-winning documentary Kiki. They also sit on the board of directors for Doc Society and serve as a consultant and choreographer on Ryan Murphy's hit FX series Pose. She's a consultant programmer for Outfest, Newfest, and Outfest Fusion, and the overall overseer for the legendary International House of Comme des Garçons. Twiggy's continued mission is to elevate the authentic representation of the House Ballroom Community worldwide. Welcome, Twiggy.
Good evening. Screen went Great. I'm Twiggy Poochie Garçon. I use she, her, they, and them pronouns. I am from the South. I was born and raised in Portsmouth, Virginia, and not recently anymore, moved to New York about 12 years ago to pursue my education at the Fashion Institute of Technology. So I'm going to do a bit of a combination of video with some lecture, ask you some questions. It's a little bit more interactive. I don't want to talk at you. I would like for us to have a conversation with one another. Is that cool? Great. So I'm going to start, just in case you haven't already seen it, if it wants to work, with a clip from Pose.
Focus, children. It is time we remind the world who we are. Jackpot. Mother, what do we take? Everything. The category is loyalty. Junkie.
I want to be a star.
You ever consider joining a house?
What do you mean?
Well, a house is a family you get to choose.
I have bigger dreams of performing at some ball. I have nowhere else to go.
Correct. It's that white boy again. Is this your first time doing something like this?
Whispering love.
Yes. What exactly is a ball?
Balls are a gathering of people who are not welcome to gather anywhere else.
Darling, the champagne is burnt.
This is what it's like to be a person at the top of the rainbow room.
What's better, the dream or the reality?
The reality.
What do you want out of life?
I want to be treated like any other woman. That's my dream.
Baby, you are our secret weapon. And that is how
on FX. So I'm going to start with this phrase and then go through a sort of historical timeline of the House and Ballroom scene that a lot of folks actually don't know. Institutionalized rejection of difference is an absolute necessity in a profit economy, which needs outsiders as surplus people. As members of such an economy, we've all been programmed to respond to the human differences between us with fear and loathing, and to handle that difference in one of three ways. Ignore it, and if that's not possible, copy it if we think it's dominant, or destroy it if we think it's subordinate. But we have no patterns for relating across our human differences as equals. As a result, those differences have been misnamed and misused in the service of separation and confusion. Archie Lord. So the House and Ballroom scene is, or commonly known in our community as the HBC, is a community that is autonomously organized by queer and trans people of color and always has been. It has its origins originally in the 20s and 30s, and some of us would even argue before that. If we take a moment to go back in time and think about Black and brown folks migrating from the South to the North, performance has always been a part of our history and a part of our culture. One of the things, or one of the sort of competitive performances that happened back on plantations was a part of that migration, and those were called cakewalks or prize walks, and those were competitions that happened on plantations. So we'll watch a video of one of those and sort of talk through the migration of the Harlem Renaissance, which is where ballroom all began.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Don't worry, you're not missing out on the music.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress.
I think it's a little
Visit
boring
us
because
at
it's the Library of Congress.
loc.gov.
So we find ourselves in Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance in the 1920s and 30s, and queer and trans folks in resistance to homophobia and transphobia from the Black church found themselves making safe spaces. Those safe spaces sort of happen in one of two ways, usually: rent parties, which happen in salons, and drag balls, which happen in huge venues all around New York City, but mostly in Harlem. This particular picture is from a category, forgive their language, that you'll read on the screen, from one of the original balls in the 20s, where Langston Hughes and sort of the Harlem elite all attended. The Harlem drag ball scene found itself migrating from New York City down to Philadelphia, across to Chicago, then down to DC, into Baltimore, Virginia, and then down south. Sort of a reverse migration, if you will, throughout the 40s and 50s. Fast forward to 1967, we meet Crystal LaBeija, who was a queen who was very well known in the drag ball scene at the time. And this is her dear friend, Phil Black, who was one of the first drag performers to get their SAG-AFTRA unionization back then. So in 1967, there was a ball that happened where Crystal was up for the crown. She made it to the final round. And this is all documented in The Queen, if you want to see the full film. What we're going to watch is what happened as she was called up to stage.
Here's our fourth runner-up, Miss Alfonso from Chicago. Let's hear it for her, ladies and gentlemen. Our third runner-up in the 1967 Nationals from Manhattan, Miss Crystal, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for her, the third runner-up in the 1967 Nationals. Okay, now we're down to the real nitty-gritty. And here are our three finalists. Come on, kids. Come on up here to the front of the stage and let the audience have a good look at you. to show temperament. Get back here and stay with the other finalists. Oh, well, you've got this second course.
Crystal gracefully decides to leave the stage. This next clip is what happens after. I'll advise you to try and listen more than you're watching because it's very dark, so you can't see, but the words that are stated are really important.
She is not beautiful, has no qualification, and she's body that. Darling, she didn't deserve it.
Answer me. You're not speaking from the damn camera. You have a mind. Do you think she deserves it?
No, she deserved it. All of them, the judges knew it too. But she was terrible. And her explanation for why she wanted the money, to put it in the bank. She's not getting any money because Sabrina is not going to pay her. They're good friends. It's only publicity and it's bad publicity. So Hall and all the rest of them, I'm declared as one of the ugliest people of the world.
And next time she should drop
And
her
they're not
outfit
going
off at
to
the
rest
cleaners
in New
before she
York.
wears it on stage.
She better get the hell back to Philadelphia because she's one of the worst. And where's Miss Sabrina? I'll sue the man. I will sue. No, I did not release. And if she releases any picture on me, I will sue the fool. She won't make money off of mine, dang on. She can make it off of Apollo and all the rest of the fools that will flock to her, but not Crystal Dawn. Anybody flock to her. You can take all the pictures you want of me, but I better not see them on the street because it's over. Get a picture with me and Harlow and see which is more beautiful, darling. The judges didn't have any taste. It was with you that the judges was with, darling. You were in it. It was all week, 2 weeks. Monique told me not to come. That's why Monique is not here today, because she's one of the... Monique, darling. Monique was not here as a friend of yours. She's a friend of mine, darling. Monique, could you tell her why you didn't come? Because she knew it fit to her. She said, Crystal, darling, don't go. Because you're not going to get it. And that's why all the true beauties didn't come. It's in bad taste and you're showing your color and showing... I am doing it bad, but I have a right to show my color, darling. I am beautiful, and I know I'm beautiful.
May I say this to you?
Taking the wrong way. Shit, she looked bad. And no way to what you say to come about it. Look at Harlow's outfit. That is right. Don't bother her. Don't bother her. Oh, it's not Harlow's fault. It's not her fault. I know it's not her fault. Harlow has done it. She can't help it because you're beautiful and you're young. You deserve to have the best in life, but you didn't deserve. Miss D, I don't say she's not beautiful, but she wasn't looking beautiful tonight. She doesn't equal me. Look at her makeup. It's terrible. And did you complain to the judges? No, I didn't. I wasn't thinking really. But they told me, Sabrina, that you had it fixed for Harlow. Everyone knew about you having it fixed for Harlow for weeks and weeks.
Now we listen to you. I listen to every word you had to say. Now wait a second. Hold it. There's a party after here. Every one of the judges is going to be there. You may feel perfectly free. I'll cart you over myself, and you can talk to each one of them. Most of those people I never saw before in my life. I don't know them. I went down to the Dom one. Wait a second, dear. You listen to me. I went down to the Dom one night, tried to influence Mr. Warhol to come up here as a judge. We sat down there for 2 hours and couldn't even get an audience with Andy Warhol. He's running around his factory making a movie or something.
Everybody goes out. What did you say? Everybody go out. Everybody go outside. Everybody go outside. Show us some important out there. Out. Everybody out. Let's go.
What are folks' reaction to that? I know it was a little bit difficult to see and maybe even to hear parts of it, but did folks extract anything from what happened? Was it clear? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Crystal was very angry and unfortunately reading Harlow, and that wasn't the nicest thing. But her point was that the competition was rigged and that she was told that the competition was rigged, but she thought she still had a chance because she's beautiful and she's talented. And that the competition was rigged specifically because of colorism and racism. If you notice, the 3 finalists who won, none of them were people of color. So her argument was around racism and calling the judges out on that. Sabrina, who, rest in peace, just passed a few years ago's point was, why didn't you say anything to the judges? Like, you're raising all this sort of hell outside, but you didn't say anything to the judges. But I guess in the context of 1967, what autonomy or agency might she have felt in the moment to say something to the judges? And so between 1968 and 73, the first five houses began. Prior to that, there was a drag ball scene that was much more like pageantry. As a result of this incident, Crystal decided to create something new, which was then known as the house and ballroom scene. Crystal created the first house, which is the House of La Beja. 5 other trans women followed suit during Corey Avis Pendavis, Paris Dupree, and Duchess LaWong creating the 5 houses to follow. How many people have seen and or heard of Paris is Burning? Right, so you've seen Paris, and even Dorian, and Paris, one of Crystal's daughters. So a house, what is a house? It's a family, it's a social group, it's a fraternity, a sorority. Yep. Oh, yes. Oh, well, thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. That's nice of you. So a house is a family. It's a fraternity. It's a sorority. It's a production company. It is all of the things. It's called a house because it takes on a familiar structure, in that the leaders are called the parents and the members are called the children. In the years post 1967, between 1967 and I would say up until maybe the single digit 2000s, the house and ballroom scene, as we know it, we call it the mainstream scene. In the early 2000s, something evolved from that house and ballroom scene called the Kiki scene. In the Kiki scene, if you sort of have to think of them comparatively, think of the mainstream scene from 67 up until early 2000s and still happening, but as varsity, right? And you think of the Kiki scene as junior varsity. So younger folks who weren't necessarily in mainstream houses would go to sort of community centers, LGBT centers, nonprofit organizations, and they would have these mock balls, right? They would make up houses that weren't houses, and mock the categories. Their mock balls turned into Kiki balls, and in our world, Kiki just means to have fun. Kiki balls quickly shifted into a Kiki scene when they started to create their own Kiki houses. Does that make sense? Cool. So a ball, if you're a little less familiar, just a competition. It's there where it all goes down. Everything, I'm gonna talk through the categories in a bit with examples, but these are the competitions, and if you've never been to one, try and make your way to New York City in the summer. I'm gonna show one more trailer before we start talking about the categories, and this is my documentary, Kiki, which is specifically about the Kiki scene that came out at Sundance in 2016.
I remember being in school, we did a dance to the song called Peaches and Cream. So I came home to show my dad the dance, he was so upset. So I just went into my room Mom was like, don't dance.
When people step onto the floor, they're telling you no matter what you think, I am beautiful. Everyone's unique, and the Kiki scene is a place for young people to explore that uniqueness. High kicking and everything, America.
It's this competitive scene to get away from rejection, homophobia, lack of acceptance.
It's a safe haven.
Come on, scrub that out. We got juice on the floor.
It's you. No one can tell you that it's not. You're real. We have homelessness, we have disease, we target the most at-risk populations.
Kiki scene, they have these songs as a creative outlet.
We started to expose this into mainstream society. So tonight we're going to have a Kiki ball here.
Our job is not done until all countries have ballroom. All LGBTQ people have a place to go low and slam their backs. The word is Kiki! Kiki! Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, Kiki!
I had to be big and bad in order to not be bullied because I was so feminine.
I accept it. I think she's sexy. Like me.
I'm normal. I cry, I laugh, I have fun, I get lonely. But more than anything, I love.
Don't you judge me, okay?
So, the categories. There are a number of main categories that have subdivisions. So when you go to a ball, what happens is, let's back into that. Before a ball, a promoter, like an individual person or several people and or a house itself will decide that they're gonna have a ball. So they pick the date, they get the venue, they secure the DJ, and they release a flyer that has the theme of the ball. And each category requires you to bring a specific look. That's what we call an effect. That's the costume that you're supposed to come and compete in. When you get to the ball and they call your category, the process goes as such. The commentator says the name of the category, the music starts, and you are judged by a panel of judges. That first set of judging is called getting your tens. So when you come up, you perform whatever the category is, and performance for each of these categories looks different. We'll watch the videos. And there's a panel of judges that all have to give you a 10 score. If one of the judges decides to chop you, meaning that you either did not perform the category well or you did not bring the look that night, you're chopped and you're not allowed to enter the battle zone. Once everyone gets their 10s, then the battles compete, sort of process of elimination style, until the last two are standing in those battle for the trophy and or cash. That makes sense? So each category, again, has sort of elements to it and ways that they're performed. We'll watch a video of at least one of the different sort of subdivisions of these, and I'll explain as we go. So face is a beauty category, self-explanatory, and face is usually broken down at balls by gender identity. And so this particular category, Femme Queen Face, is for trans women. And the 5 elements of face, no matter who it's for, are skin, teeth, eyes, nose, and structure. So this is Femme Queen Face. Them to bring in like an ice queen. is a category about your walk, literally your catwalk. There's sort of two main types of runway: European runway, which is a feminine walk; All-American runway, which is a masculine walk. This category is European runway. And again, same sort of process, right? Get their chins and they battle. This look is supposed to be intergalactic. So performance is a broad umbrella term for all of the different types of Vogue. Vogue started out in the old way, which is sort of a combination of posing to music, literally like pose, 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 pose to the beat. Old way evolved into new way, which is a bit more about you stretching and contorting your body to a beat. And then there is femme queen performance, which is the type of Vogue that trans women do, which has a little bit more fluidity and femininity. And then a category evolved called butch queen, voguing like a femme queen, which means a gay guy voguing like a trans woman. You know, it's very literal, which is now called Vogue Femme. All of that to say that that category is now called Vogue Femme. Vogue Femme is the type of performance that you probably see if you see a Vogue clip anywhere now in 2019. This person, Deshaun Wesley London, is known worldwide as the king of Vogue. What video just came out? Sam Smith, who was in that recent video. So this is Deshaun at a dance competition in Sweden called Street Star.
Ain't nobody gonna do it. One, pump the bitch. No. little bit of fun, you know?
So just like other categories, performance has, well, Vogue Film specifically has 5 elements: catwalk, duck walk, spins, dips, and hand performance. Do not let anyone ever tell you again that it's called a death drop. That is incorrect. Tell them I fixed it for you. It is called a dip, D-I-P, dip. It's not a death trap. That's not a word. Great. Next up is fashion, and there's, again, an array of fashion categories. One of the oldest of those is called Best Dressed Spectator, which literally means you are the best dressed person in the ball and you spectate, meaning you are not allowed to compete in any other category. Another one is labels, which means everything, literally from head to toe, including your undergarments, has to be a designer label. There's foot and eyewear, which is sort of self-explanatory. It is you're judged on your foot and your eyewear, which also have to be designer. This particular category is a labels category, and what they wanted to see was a pampered pet. So I'll let this play all the way, almost all the way through, because it's going to be very difficult for you to notice one person's pampered pet, but I'll talk about it after.
Come on, soul, please. You're not going to see a people dead with a pampered pet. Come on, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Oh, mother. Now the next one down. Stand, no dancing, not come on. Stand to the side, don't see a people dead. I can't, honey. Straight, clear, now. 1, stand, don't be slow. Break everybody's coming. Come on. Wait. Don't show your pet yet, honey. Let it go. Come here, honey. Where's your pet, Stephanie? Oh, bitch, she got that motherfucking roach, bitch. The one with the motherfucking things on it.
So her pampered pet is a Swarovski crystal encrusted hermit crab that she wore as a brooch. Needless to say, she won the category.
Is that a lie, bitch? Look, Stephanie. You shake me, bitch. You shake.
Next is Sex Siren, which was a category created in the 1990s. Sex Siren is literally what the words mean, and so the person who's competing has to scream sex. So you're gonna see, it's gonna look like a strip show, just to like be cut and dry.
One dog, one life, 2 life, 2 dogs, 3 dogs.
Next is a similar category. This clip is really fast, which is body. The difference in Sex Siren and body is that Sex Siren, while many of them have very nice bodies, they're not technically judged on their physique. They're judged on their sex appeal. Body, you're actually judged on your actual physique. So they have like model's body, they have muscular body, they have luscious body, but you're judged literally on your physique and not your sex appeal. Realness. Okay. Realness is one of the oldest categories in the ballroom scene. I think, historically speaking, realness may have been helpful in the past as a form of folks to practice their passability through a lens of like, I need to be safe because times are different. I think now realness is a bit more problematic because of the sort of winning of a category or a trophy or money because of your passability just has issues, especially in the context of today, where not that things are completely accepted, but differently than they needed to be back in the 60s and 70s, especially. So this category I have mixed feelings about. It's still a category. This particular night, they wanted to see a production. So in ballroom, when you get your 10s, you can sort of perform the category and like that's all you do. Or you can bring a production, which means you have sort of a team of people, specific music that you have to give the DJ, props, like the whole nine. It's literally a production, right? And so this house decided to bring schoolboy realness, which is what it is, schoolboy realness. You look like you go to school, as a fraternity. And it's very long, so we won't watch the whole thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, give the House of Prodigy a round of applause. There's more than I've done. Thanks, man.
So again, they won. And the really impressive thing about that is houses have chapters all around the country and some even all around the world. And so two things, most of those folks don't live in the same place. Second thing is none of them are in an actual fraternity. So they literally made that and won the category. This is a slide I usually use when I'm teaching runway specifically. That's the category I walk. I've been walking runway for 14 years, almost 15. I'm legendary for European runway. And that's one thing that I did not mention within the scene. I won't talk through these, but because you watched it, there's 5 elements of runway as well. Your pose, your pivots and turns, your actual walk, your persona or your attitude, and then your effect and how you wear it. Those are the 5 sort of elements of runway. The last point that I make before I open it up for questions, well, the last few points is around status. So within the scene, there's sort of levels of accolade that you get or attain as you get really good and master a category. And so when you first start winning a category, traveling, winning grand prizes, winning trophies in different places, you're known as a star. That's your sort of level, right? Around 3 to 5 years in of consistently traveling, walking, competing, winning, you move up to statement. And somewhere between 7 and 10 years, you move up to legend for a particular category. If you continue to contribute sort of beyond that category and sort of contribute to the scene in a way beyond that, usually around 15 and 20 years, then you're deemed an icon in the scene. And that's pretty much like the highest acclaim that you could get. So if you hear someone who's a ballroom icon, that means they've been in this for about 15 or 20 years, and they've transcended just mastering a category. They've literally like contributed and helped elevate the scene in some way. So I'll wrap by saying, again, I've been in the ballroom scene for 14 years. When I came into the scene, 15 years this year, when I came to the scene, it was at a time where my family did not accept me. I was asked to leave my church. And ballroom became my family. The houses that I were a part of, which we use the word chosen family, now became my real family. And the community that I didn't know existed became pretty much my world. It was my first father in the ballroom scene that gave me the encouragement to even apply to FIT and leave Virginia and go to New York. And so I've sort of dedicated all of my life and my work to elevating the representation of ballroom in media, and to telling all the folks like you about the history and legacy of what ballroom is and what it's done. So thank you. The floor is open for questions. Yep.
So, thank you. That was really actually wonderful. Very, very great. I thought I knew a lot about it, but I guess I knew very little actually. But I had a question on, so do you perform one category only, or is it, can you be in multiple categories, and is, like, sorry, I'm not talking. No. Oh, sorry. Can you perform in multiple in the same night, or is it usually like one night is dedicated to one?
So it depends. It depends on a few things. One is if the categories clash, right? And another is sort of your level of mastery in that category. And then the third thing is how the categories are scheduled that night. So for example, if you, there's a category called Realness with a Twist, which means you're a male presenting person who walks realness, and then you also Vogue, right? And so if it just so happens that the order of the categories doesn't work out and realness is after performance, then a judge might be like, isn't that the person who was voguing, like when you're walking realness? So you have to like take all of that into consideration. I think in the 80s and 90s, more people walked more than one category in one night. Now folks are sort of redirecting and trying to master one category and become legend in that category, and then they'll sort of switch to other categories. But generally speaking, most folks don't, some people do.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
So for you as like a consultant on Pose, what was like, I guess like the most important thing for you that you wanted like audiences to like take away from it, or like the message that you wanted like get from it?
I think there's a few things. I wanted ballroom to be as involved in every part of creating the show as possible was my first and main thing. When the first press release came out about Pose, which was in like 2017, it's crazy that that's the case, but it was around 2017, and I saw the article, I read it, and I didn't know the person who I'm now very close friends with that co-created and like sort of wrote the original script, who partnered with Ryan. And I made this Facebook post, like, this is great, love Ryan's stuff, or some of his stuff, and who from Ballroom is working on it? No, just kidding, I love my stuff. And so, it's really genuinely, because I watch all of his shows, and I have since Nip Tuck maybe, I'm like, how is this going to work without somebody from the scene? Like, the production value is going to be phenomenal, but how are they going to get the story right? And I made a post about it. And one of my friends who is an anomaly, she is the overall mother of the house, meaning she is the highest position, the highest mother position in that house. Her name is Trace Lissette. She's a trans activist and actor. She's most notably from Transparent. She tagged a friend of hers who knew a person who was on the show, and they were like, oh, this is gonna be an issue. We should have thought about this. And this is someone from Ryan's team who may not have had a conversation with him. Fast forward, someone from his team reached out to me, set up a call. That didn't work. I was out of the country. So I was in LA, and his team just invited me to his office. And the sort of very unique thing that happened was that I thought that this would be more like an interview. Like, he would be sort of asking me why I'm a fit to work on the show, right? And what happened was the exact opposite. He was very transparent about wanting to get this right, and sort of like went through all the ways that he thought that looked, and we bounced ideas. And 2 months later, I became a consultant on the show. So that was my first thing. Is to make sure that like from the production story point that that it was done in an authentic way. And the next thing, a part of that, just not separate but sort of adjacent, is the sort of representation you see on the camera. And so, yes, this is the sort of biggest LGBT cast in a show like this in history. And also, 3 of the leads have been in houses. Right, so Dominique, who plays Electra, is an icon of the ballroom scene. MJ used to be in the house, and so did India and Haley. And so the sort of like thread of authenticity still follows through, right? Like behind the camera and in front of the camera. And I think that still leads and is connected to what I personally wanted folks to get out of watching the show. It's like, we've all heard and seen Paris is Burning, which is a documentary, but to like sort of tell that story through our lens and have our people represented, and to get this sort of reach, hasn't happened before. So, does that answer your question?
So thank you, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
Second, I didn't know this was like a thing before tonight, so just as a question, how do I go about defining these competitions
To attend an actual ball? Yeah. Well, a good start is to come to New York. Not that they're only in New York, ballroom is global at this point, but there's a particular ball that happens in New York every year. That's probably the biggest ball of the year in New York, and it's called the Latex Ball. It's on Saturday, June 22nd at Terminal 5. And you can just literally Google the Latex Ball and you'll see maybe 20 years of them on YouTube. So I would recommend you come to that one, and I say that one, specifically because they have organizations that sort of serve the community in a number of different ways there. And you can get all sorts of information about other balls, other events, orgs that work with the ballroom scene at that one ball. Also, it's on Facebook. And on YouTube, Ballroom Throwbacks. It is an account that's created by a person from the scene. It is an account that sort of is an archive of ballroom footage. And he has footage from, I think, as early as the 90s, all the way through now. Yeah. Did you have your, yeah.
I've heard some people call it balls and some people call it ballroom. Like, is there like a preferred term? Is there a term that you shouldn't use for ballroom? Like stuff like that.
Interchangeable, but balls aren't specifically the competitions. The ballroom scene is like the whole community. But you can still use them interchangeably. Yeah.
Do you find that do people find ballroom or does ballroom find them?
I think both things happen. I think that, especially now in 2019, I think both things happen. For me, ballroom found me, and I found it. Again, as I said, it was at a really difficult sort of mental and emotional and spiritual time for me. However, at the time, there were these similar but totally different runway competitions that I was a part of as a child. And so, where I'm from, those are really big, and balls were really underground, and these weren't underground. And so a person who went to my high school also went to my dance studio. He knew who I was from walking those competitions. I had no clue what ballroom was, no clue what voguing was, but we had a dance class together at the studio. And so between classes, he would vogue, and I had no idea what voguing was. So he would like talk about it, and I would like go look it up. He would talk about it, and I would go look it up. Needless to say, so we we found each other in that way. But it doesn't always happen like that. I think if you live in a big city with a larger ballroom scene like New York, Atlanta, DC, Chicago, LA, then it's much easier to come across than if you live in a smaller city. So I think both happen. Any other questions? Yep.
You gave us, first, thank you so much. You gave us so much really wonderful history on ballroom, so I was wondering if you had any insights into how the form has changed over time, or how just sort of the contemporary connected age permits more people to get involved, or what do you think new media offers to ballroom?
I think there's pros and cons. I mean, structurally the ballroom scene has changed a lot, and again, in very good and very bad ways. I think there's this misogyny within the ballroom scene that's very problematic. The ballroom scene was created by trans women, and sort of the ways in which trans women are held in high regard for their performativity and their beauty, and not sort of put in positions of power within the scene in the way that they were then is very problematic now. One of the things that new media has done is sort of, and this can be good and bad, but gotten ballroom out of the underground in such a way that folks who desire to attain or to use their skills that they honed in ballroom in mainstream in one way or another, whether that's makeup, hair, performing, acting, sort of open that door, so that's a good thing. On the flip side of that, because that door is open, it doesn't just mean that we go out and like go into mainstream, it means mainstream comes in too, right? And that has a lot of adverse effects. So I think it is both good and bad. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I think you kind of alluded to this with the death count versus dips.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel like it's really common for ballroom culture to be co-opted?
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the prime example of one of the cons of ballroom sort of being mainstream now, and everyone's into voguing, meanwhile not knowing, first and foremost, the history, much less the actual technical things about it, right? Because we have never said death drop within the community. Never. That's never been a thing. And even the specific dip that people are referring to when they say a death drop is called a Maka-ella. And so it has a very specific name. So the fact that it, like, someone just like made some shit up, you know, they literally made it up, says a lot.
Do you feel like that's having an influence on ballroom culture today, the way that it's functioning, the way that mainstream is looking at culture?
A bit. I think that there's sort of parts and people of ballroom who are all into it, they're here for it, and then there's parts and people of ballroom who like wanted to go back underground for a number of reasons. I think there's this sort of sacred sense of intimacy that is not necessarily at all balls, right? So for example, the latex ball was never that way, but that is even bigger now, right? So it's very difficult to have a ball in the way that you could have before, where there's just ballroom folks and not a lot of spectators and folks who are not a part of the community, and people have feelings about that.
Do you think that the Kiki scene is kind of like providing that intimacy you mentioned with the balls, in the past? Like, is it bringing that back, or is that also
Both. I think that because the Kiki scene still, one is youth-led, and two is connected to all of these organizations that sort of do like human service work, keeps it guarded. There's even a whole coalition called the Kiki Coalition that is a group of both folks in the Kiki scene and folks that work at those organizations that like sort of intentionally filter what sort of media entities or presence are even allowed at the balls. So there's a much more strong system in place to sort of prevent that from happening at Kiki balls than there is at mainstream balls, I would say. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you all. Thank you. Cool.
The drag show is April 2nd. Tickets will be available on March 11th. Per usual, we will run out of tickets, so please make sure that you pick them up ahead of time. And Twiggy will be giving an out to lunch lecture tomorrow at 12:30 in the Rainbow Center on youth homelessness. So if you're interested in hearing more from her, please drop by. Once again, thanks to the Center-Driven Student Programs team, and in your brochure and pamphlet, all of information about the drag show is in there, but also a QR code and a link to fill out a program evaluation for tonight's event. If you could please fill that out, that helps us run events in the future. Thank you.